after.
Boy, I sure hope the audio is
difficulties.
working this time. The screen looks beautiful. I don't know why. Someone who has an insight on the YouTube community sent an email to the CEO. I don't even know who the CEO of
Susan Wojcicki, or there might be a new. Sure.
I don't know, but it's problematic. So it seems like every other live we do, we don't get the audio started. But we got some different stuff for you this evening.
If you guys noticed, there's two things that are different with this live. First off, Michael isn't here. Him and Jenna are out in Hollywood.
Yeah, Jenna and Michael are on the set of Cursed Waters, which is a themed film.
I'm kind of excited to sell, and I've been seeing some of. It looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, the Mahal Brothers does a lot of indie films, a lot of direct to DVD, but their productions are always fun. They've got a lot of good people that get involved, and usually large cast, and everyone's good to be around. So I'm excited to hear how that was for them when they get back. And this could be our last Wednesday night live because we're considering changing dates. If you haven't put in your opinion on what night of the week works best for y'all, but
we got a community poll up, so go vote. I think we're still deciding, right?
Yeah, really what it comes down to is one of the biggest community nights during the week is Wednesday evening for Pokemon Go, and you all may know that Pokemon Go is a big passion of Michael's, and he loves going to the park and meeting with the community. And there's been a couple obligations that I've had to miss out on too on Wednesday evenings. So we just figured we'd take a see if more people are able to tune in on other nights of the week. But since they were out of town, Dan was like a little kid in a candy shop bugging me all week to do this live setup. So I really wanted to make it happen. And he's worked really hard. We've all worked really hard. And let me mention that the AC is on the fritz here.
Yeah, we are.
So it's approximately 86 degrees in the office right now. We got the lights on.
The fish are probably loving it, though.
And we're making this happen. So if you just see me like pit sweat through this, you know why.
But yeah, we went and got this aquarium set up. We had this tank flying around, and I went out this morning.
Make sure that people can see your beautiful face. Nudge over a little bit.
Yeah,
I know we got this big aquarium going on.
Let me move over a little bit.
So, and Dan's our full-time animal care tech. If you all don't know him, I'm sure you've been familiar with some of our previous animal care tech Sage.
You saw the live with Anthony when we did the what was it, bee wax?
Yeah, when us three tried to do that.
Yeah. So
yeah, he's been on before. So Sage is on summer holiday, working away at a seasonal job currently. And but yeah, he's the new the fresh meat, but he's been doing a great job. He's been, how long have you been on board with us now?
About 3 months.
Yeah, 3 months, and he's really done good at jumping in and taking care of the animals. He drew a short straw because he's been working a lot of solo shifts, but he's been keeping up, and I've been really impressed by his work with the animals so far. So big shout out to Dan. Everyone give Dan some love in the comments. I didn't type it up, but I gave you some. Taylor's got a question.
We have a question from the Snake Man. We also have a super chat from Hear This.
Thanks, Hear This.
They said smiley face. So our question is ironically from somebody called the Snake Man. And he asked, what's the best overall big snake to have as a pet?
Well, I can tell you it's not a reticulated python. I'll tell you that right now.
Why don't you like the retics?
Well, they get 18 feet. They're not exactly that easy to keep, you know, especially if this is a pet you're going to have at your house.
Yeah.
Did say big snake.
There's different categories of big snakes.
There is something I like. I think retics look cool. I'm just not a fan of how huge they get, but there is something called a super dwarf. You can get, so it's a retic that gets only about 9-10 feet long, so about the size of a red-tailed boa. Yeah, but you will pay a pretty penny if you want one of those.
I will say, you all know me. I'm not like the biggest animal wrangler. You know, that's why Uncle still has a job here. But the red-tailed boas are really well-mannered.
Oh, yeah, they're great. We have 3 of them. Not one of them has ever given us issues. So.
Yeah, and so definitely would recommend a red-tailed boa, and that's a very sizable snake. I mean, they get like
8 to 9 feet usually. Yeah,
and they get chunky, and you know they're almost too much to carry once they get to be adults. You know, some of our largest red tails we have, I don't think we put them on the scale recently, but they can get like 60, 70, 80 pounds, I'm sure.
Oh
so.
yeah, for sure.
But I'd say red-tailed boa is my favorite large species snake. And it just depends because, like, what's large to you? Like a 6-foot snake is still really large.
Right, like even like a full-grown ball python for some people, that's pretty large.
Yeah, adult ball python gets pretty big too, and they're the best snake. If you haven't had big snakes before, I don't know where you're coming from. If you're keeping already, but ball pythons are such a great snake to start with. But it takes time for them to get big too, and most people buy them as little babies, and
Right.
before you know it, in a couple of years, you got this ginormous snake on you.
Oh, I got more chick poop on me.
Yeah, so Dan, tell us about what you're holding in your hands there. I'm sure people are confused. There's an aquarium here that we really haven't talked about.
Yeah, we'll get to the aquarium in a second, but this here is Kudo. It's our new falcon chicken. If you didn't know the name Kudo, it basically means miracle, and I think it's Croatian. Names him that miracle is because we weren't even expecting to have the other in Haley. If you guys haven't met Haley, she's the other animal care tech on the team now. We were going out to fill up some hay for the kangaroo hut, and we have a huge tarp over that. Well, we found some chicken eggs under there, and one of them was already hatching, and that's where Kudo was. So we brought him in, gave him the incubator treatment, 5-star hotel basically for chicken. And he's been doing pretty good ever since. We don't know if it's a boy or a girl actually yet. But.
Yeah, we did a roundabout in the back chicken yard where the kangaroo and the wallaby are as well. He just roosted up on my arm right now. And I was like, yeah, Tyson, our kangaroo needs more hay and his thing, and just doing the dotting the T's, crossing the I's. But, and ended up finding a bunch of eggs that the chickens had left behind.
Yeah, we don't know if the other ones are viable yet, but we're going to be checking on that pretty soon. We just left them out there so the mom can sit on them, and then we'll find out through that.
So a falconry chicken is just a chicken that's really used to humans. So this chicken's going to get the human experience, really get hands-on from a young age, and you can put jesses on them.
It's already ready for the glove like that. It's just sitting on your arm.
Yeah, I mean, not even a week old probably now. Possibly a week old.
Yeah, I think about 6-7 days since hatch. Shout out to Taylor, by the way, because this chick was hatching overnight. Taylor actually came in and helped them break out the last bit of that egg. So
yeah, so if the eggs are too hard, if they didn't get enough humidity, it can be too hard for them to break out of the shell. And so this little one had made it halfway out the shell, but was struggling. And luckily, Taylor was able to get me on the phone. And I told her to just help this little one out of the shell. Just perched up properly on my finger now. How cute.
So I'll put this little one back, and then we'll talk about the giant glass box that's on the table right now.
In the meantime, Cole, would you like to answer a question?
Yeah, Taylor, question.
I don't know if you're going to know the answer to this, but Snake Man wants to know what would happen if a venomous snake bit itself by accident while striking in defense or at a prey item?
So this, to my knowledge, been around the block a little bit here, but I don't believe the venom of a venomous snake affects itself. I don't believe that's how it's happened. And there's a lot of snakes that the venom of venomous snakes doesn't affect them as well. But I don't know if you have any insight to that, if you've ran into that before.
I'm not sure how that works. I know venom usually works in 2 ways. There's 2 types of venom. One that attacks the nervous system, and then there's venom that attacks the bloodstream.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if it worked differently based on that, but I haven't looked at venom too much.
Like,
so.
If this was Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, I could confidently say, I'd confidently make the bet that it is not affected by its own venom. I'd be fine with that.
I have a scientific answer.
Taylor's got a scientific answer.
The scientific answer is that over time, snakes are exposed to small amounts of their own venom, whether that's through some sort of injury in their mouth or they swallow a whole lot of it, but it's usually at the glands in their eyes. So they're able to slowly, over time, soak up their own venom.
They're pre-exposed.
Which means that their own specific venom they become, quote unquote, immune to.
And that makes a lot of sense then, because they're developing their own antibodies over time. Because if you guys didn't know, the way they make is they take a snake's venom. So say you want to make anti-venom for copperheads, they'll take copperhead venom, and they'll inject it into a large animal. They usually use like a horse, just because it's a really big animal, so it doesn't die. Um, and then the horse will create antibodies against the venom, and they're able to harvest those then. So that's how they get antibodies for antivenom.
Fascinating. Thank you, horses. So, Dan, it seems like you're an avid fisherman.
I am, yeah. I've been fishing ever since middle school.
So maybe about a month ago, Dan came to me and he says, I'd really love to do a live to talk about fish. And one of the things we don't have here at Wildlife Command Center is an aquarium. And so this is just a temporary aquarium. And yes, we've maybe put these fish through a little bit of stress, but we've done our best to make sure that they are accommodated in the best way possible during their short stay here at Wildlife Command Center. But do you want to talk about what you got in here?
Yeah, so if you guys didn't know, we have a creek that runs behind the center. It's called Rock Creek. So this morning I went out and I fished Rock Creek. Not the section behind our center, just because it's really shallow back here. So I had to travel a little bit east to find these guys. I went to a state park, but it is the same water. It's the same creek. So when the live's over, we're going to release these guys in the creek behind the center. They'll do just fine.
And that runs right into the Merrimack, I believe.
I think it's the Mississippi.
I don't think it runs directly to the Mississippi. I think Merrimack to Mississippi.
I could be wrong. I haven't looked at the map in a minute. So.
Well, you figured out because you're this one.
I'm pretty sure it runs into the Merrimack.
Okay.
This is another.
If you're confident on that.
Yeah, this is another Who Wants to Be a Millionaire question here. I'm pretty confident. I can rest my bones at night knowing that. So, but yeah, so we fetch these right out of our backyard. We got a little stream that runs through, and Dan, I was like, all right, man, you see what you can come up with. But what did we end up getting here today?
So we got 2 long-eared sunfish. These are the bigger ones. They're my favorite fish. They're absolutely gorgeous. You can see they got a lot of red coloration of them, and they've got these blue stripes that go along their face. The way they get their name is you see that black dot there? That's called the operculum. So the fish, the operculum is basically where the gill ends. So the operculum protects the gills from the fish. And these guys have a really long one. That's where that black dot is. That's how they get the name long-eared sunfish, because it looks like they have really big ears. So we got 2 of those guys. And you can tell which ones they are just because they're so gorgeous. The other 2 are creek chubs. They're basically a bait fish. A lot of people don't really fish for them. I actually caught one of them on mistake while I was trying to catch the long ears. But they still look cool. We figured we'd throw them in the tank just so you guys can see them. They have a lot of purple on their upper parts. That's an easy way to identify them. It's a lot more noticeable when they're out of the water.
What are they? The chubs again? What are they called?
Creek chub is what that species is called. They're very common in Rock Creek. They're everywhere if you go down to the creek, and in a lot of creeks around eastern Missouri. And then we have a crawfish in here somewhere. I don't see him right now.
He's on this side in the rock here. It's really hard to see him, I think, on the live.
So he squeezed his way in there, but we found him in the creek and thought it'd be pretty cool to have him as part of our fish family for the live. And if you guys see this rock in the center, we borrowed this from Van Diesel. He's got a temporary hide right now, but they're loving this thing. They're just chilling around in the center there. Fish love cover. And if you guys are wondering what this is over here, this bubbler, this basically is what's keeping our fish alive. So fish breathe oxygen just like humans. They just don't have lungs to filter it. They use gills instead. The way they capture oxygen from the water is there has to be movement on the water. If the water is just sitting still, once they use up all the oxygen that's in it, they're done because more oxygen can't get in the water. So what this bubbler does is it creates these bubbles that will push the water and create current, and that allows more oxygen to get into our fish stay alive. And I just wanted to say, side note, shout out to Academy Sports. I know they don't sponsor us, but they let me bring a lemur in their store, so that was pretty nice of them.
Yeah, so while Michael and Jenna have been away, Dan's been the full-time caretaker of Tootsie.
If you guys remember Tootsie, she was on the most recent live 2 weeks ago. We didn't do one last week, but 2 weeks ago we introduced her, and she got her new belly band so that she can go outside on the leash. But lemurs are really social animals, and she's not ready to be put back in with our troop just yet. So she needs a human with her at all times. So me and Jenna have been basically taking turns splitting custody of Tootsie. so I take her around with me everywhere I go. But I called them ahead of time, and I was like, "Hey, do you guys allow pets in the store?" I was being kind of vague. I didn't really want to say I had a lemur with me, but they were like, "Oh yeah, we love it. We have like dog treats and everything if you bring them in." But then all the employees and the customers that came to check her out, they were loving it. So
what else do you usually catch out in the creek? I know this was a smaller haul for you, and I know this is one of those things where, hey, we're going to do a live, so we'll see what we get. But what other things have you caught? Taylor's got a question for you, too.
It's a really quick question. Kate wants to know the difference between a bluegill and a sunfish.
okay, so a sunfish is just a general term. So bluegill is a type of sunfish. Sunfish doesn't really mean anything. It's not like a scientific term. It's just like slang, basically. But bluegill, long-ear sunfish, green sunfish, they all fit into the sunfish category. It's just a group of fish, and a bluegill is just a specific species. What was I talking about? I lost my train of thought.
You're talking about lemurs in Academy.
Oh yeah, that's right. But yeah, I brought Tootsie to Academy. She got to meet some new people, so
Fish?
that was cool.
You scared?
But I had these guys in a bucket, so they've been with me all day, and they've been doing pretty good.
Yeah, this bubbler is actually a really good idea for live wells, for sure. Is that what this is usually used for?
Yeah, that's usually what it's used for.
So
super chat.
Yeah, and then when we went out in the back, that little crawdad, we were able to catch with a little bit of a net. So I used a little reptile hook, and I was able to shimmy him into the net somehow.
Yeah, we flipped some rocks over, and we were lucky enough to find one. We found a couple, but they all went under this log where we couldn't get to them.
Let me take this out for a second.
Yeah, just so they swim around a little bit more.
So we can see the, what are they, the chubs?
The creek chubs.
Chubs.
You can really see that crawfish now. He was hiding up in there.
I don't want them to be super panicky, so I'm going to give this a second and see if they can calm down or not.
Oh, I just remember, I was talking about the other fish that I'll usually find in the creek.
Yeah. What other fish do you usually catch?
So usually when you fish, you want to go in either early morning or in the evening, because that's usually when fish are going to be more active looking for food. Usually during the middle of the day, it's really hot outside, so they're not really in hunting mode, just so they can conserve their energy. So I didn't do too well today. I'm just making excuses right now, but that's actually how it works. But I was hoping to find a bluegill and a largemouth, because I know those are both in Rock Creek. Largemouth bass are super common. They're probably one of the most well-known fish in the U.S. They're everywhere across North America. You can find them in basically any lake or pond. You could probably find them in like a sewage drain on the side of the road. They're just everywhere. And then bluegill are also super common. They're found in a lot of ponds. These long ears, a lot of people don't really know about them, and they mistake them for bluegill. Just because you can see, like, if you don't fish that often, it's just a thing you go out and do every now and then. You know, that looks a lot like a bluegill because it is a sunfish, but they're really distinct from their bright coloring and that really long black dot.
Yeah, I really didn't think that we'd have the long ears back in that creek, because I think they really need like specific conditions. But the creek that does run along the back, it is a nicer creek. You know, it's not just like
that
water
runoff.
runoff.
That water is crystal clear.
Yeah, it's very clear water, and I think it's really thanks to anytime there's a rain, things get washed along really quickly. So all the water little pools that are left are typically very clean for sure.
Yeah.
You want to get Tootsie out so people can see her?
Let's see. She's ready to come out right now. She's making all sorts of noise.
So these little ones we are going to put back into the creek once this little episode is over here. Taylor has a question.
We have a super chat with a question.
Oh, super chat.
So here it is, donated $2 and also said, are these fishes fully grown?
Yeah, so these, can they hear me from over here?
Probably not.
Yeah, I'm coming back. So these long ears are fully grown, but these creek chubs can get a little bit bigger than this. The biggest I've ever seen them is probably about like twice the size they are right now. They don't get too big just because they're more of a bait fish, but this is about full grown for the long or the ears. But most sunfish don't really get too big. Usually under like the biggest fish I've ever seen was like 8 inches.
The state record is 5 ounces, and I think it was 9 inches, or that could have been the bluegill. But I definitely know that the state record for a long-ear sunfish was 5 ounces.
Yeah, the bluegill usually get a lot bigger than the long ears do, just because they can live in ponds and stuff. These long ears, you usually won't find them in a pond or lake unless they're stocked.
What's
because
funny
they
is
like the current.
the state record was caught in a private pond in Franklin County.
Really?
Yeah,
Those had to been stocked. A lot of people will stock fish and will purposely like cultivate them and grow them to be like super fat and super huge.
I used to live in Franklin County.
Really?
Here to think I could be holding the record for the long-eared
if only you knew a
sunfish.
guy who had a private pond.
Yeah, to have the pond. Yeah, that would have been nice.
But yeah, these long ears, they usually are just found in creeks and rivers.
Why don't you bring Tootsie around this side of the
Yeah,
table?
let me bring Tootsie around just so I can get another look at her.
Taylor's got a question.
So a little bit unrelated to a lemur, but Snake Man, again, firing off questions. I've been answering some myself. But Snake Man is asking about the boas.
A little bit further away.
They're actually pythons found in the Everglades that are invasive. So they're asking about the Burmese python. Seems like they just want a little bit of information about the invasive species in Florida.
Yeah, so Florida has a lot of invasive species that are native to South America, and that has to do a lot with traveling and stuff. Like a lot of fish as well in Florida that are invasive were just kept as pets. That's how the whole snakehead thing started, I believe. Is a lot of people were keeping snakeheads as pets in Florida, and when they got too big for their tanks, they just released them in lakes, and they bred and they spread, and that's how the snakeheads became a huge problem.
Yeah, it's really how the Burmese pythons ended up becoming an issue is originally from the pet trade. But Florida is really the only environment that kind of replicates their home environments where they can actually thrive. Now, if you bring this topic up to Michael and he's answered it a couple times, he doesn't really see it as big of an issue as what a lot of other people think it is. Because, when they do these big snake roundups each year down in Florida, and of like 300 people that go out on these little snake competitions to get Burmese pythons, rarely are they coming back with a big load. I can't remember, but they're very low numbers that they come back with. So, one, it's, these people are pretty experienced with catching snakes in the first place, but, you're not going to see all the ones that are in the wild. But luckily, it's not as big of an issue, but it's still an issue. Anytime you have a non-native species in an ecosystem that didn't originally have it, it does threaten everything else to throw off the balance of all the other wildlife that is in the area. So, even if it's just one Burmese python that's in the wild in Florida, it shouldn't be there, and it's hurting other species that are native to that area. There's even parrots that are now living in the wild in Florida. The iguanas, actually at the end of this month, later here in July, 4 of us from Wildlife Command Center are going to be flying down to Miami to work with the team that specifically resolves iguana issues for different corporations down there, whether they be hotels or whatever. Their specialty is in removing iguanas. So we're going to have a big series coming out ahead from that trip. I don't know if they really answered the original question.
Yeah, I don't know too much about the Burmese python, but I do know Florida has probably the most invasive species out of any state in the U.S. I know they have the highest freshwater fish diversity because they are a tropical region. So a lot of fish that can live in South America can survive in the wild in Florida. We get a lot of stuff like the Mayan cichlid and the peacock bass.
Yeah, the peacock bass is a huge issue, and it's just they're there and they end up eating native species and push them out of their native waters, which then they can become threatened, endangered, or extinct, which then has a lot of different ramifications, definitely in regards to tourism. And, people come to specific areas to be able to see certain things. So if one native species is being threatened by a non-native species, then there ends up being an issue. Taylor.
Hear this? Super chat, first off.
Thank you. Hear this.
And they ask, but can't parrots and iguanas come north without help? Like, can't they leave the Everglades?
Like, can't parrots leave in
Yeah.
Florida where they're at. Yeah, but they're very acceptable to temperature swings. Like,
They don't do too well in the cold.
yeah, like if Cicero or blue and gold macaw were to get out in Missouri, he'd just die because he can't survive the cold weather. So unless he were to somehow be able to fly south and be in an area that would be comfortable for him, yeah, there's definitely non-native species that do live in other areas. Last live we talked about Mr. Cuddles, our green iguana that we rescued in Missouri, but luckily whoever released him during warmer weather, and we were able to find him before the cold weather came in Missouri. But he most definitely would have died in the winter months, never would have been able to survive in the state of Missouri. And so that's why it's just not as prevalent of a thing. And, you know, I always get concerned about alligator movement. I'm just like, when is it going to be a time in Missouri where we've just got alligators in waters? Like, the thought of not being able to get in water peacefully for me is really difficult. And that's always challenging when we go down to Florida. I usually remind people when we or Michael, when we step off the plane, I'm like, hey, if you could just remind me that there's alligators around me, I'd really appreciate that. Because you find yourself just, you know, I'm from Missouri, you know, you're just around a pond, you're around a lake, you don't think of it, and you're like, oh, there's alligators here that I got to be watching out for.
Well, there is an alligator here.
Yeah, speaking of alligators.
This is Christine. She's our other alligator. I know you guys have probably met Snappy before. I'm not sure if we've had her on a live yet or not. But she is a lot smaller than Snappy is.
Yeah,
She's probably about what, like 2 years old, you say?
Yeah, we usually bring Snappy out, and Snappy's our larger alligator, and Christine's our smaller one. And Christine can still deliver a wallop of a bite. So Dan's doing wonderful with her right now because she's not taped up or anything. So he's got a real live alligator in his hands.
I think I've earned the title Bare Hands Dan.
Bare Hands Dan. That's pretty good.
We could be the next Batman and Robin.
You know what? We'll just field that as an option over the next year. Really see how you expand that role. You know, Mama Lav, our 20-foot python, really needs a bath right now. And since Michael's out of town in LA, we're kind of held off on doing that. And I was joking with Dan. I'm like, if you want to wrangle a 20-foot python with me, I guess we could do that to get her a bath. And he was amped up to do it. And I'm over here like, I don't know if I want to. So I was like, but Michael and Dan are going to be handling that this next week when he comes back. So you may earn that Bare Hands Dan before you know it.
Good to know.
I knew you were kind of wanting to talk about fish and alligators and maybe some evolutionary kind of conversations around it. I don't know if you want to mention anything.
So if you guys didn't know, I'm a biology student at Maryville, so we talk a lot about evolution.
And so is Anthony. I didn't actually shout out Anthony earlier. Anthony is at Scout Camp. He's a director, I think, up there or something or another.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure, but so he's been gone this summer as well, but both of them are biology students. So shout out to Anthony.
Shout out Anthony.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's all good. But I kind of wanted to talk about Christine just because she's really related to these fish. Christine's related to these fish more than we are to Christine. And that all started with the prehistoric fish, was a fish called the Tiktaalik. And that was the first ever animal to go on land. So they looked a lot like an alligator, basically, and pretty similar size. But they only got up to about 4 feet. But what allowed them to go on land is they had wrists. So they were the first animal ever to have a wrist bone. Because a lot of animals just had like flippers and stuff like that before, so they weren't able to navigate to on land. But the Tiktaalik is where the wrist bone came from. And the whole reason that they came onto land was in search of a new food source. So I don't know if you guys... Who's it from?
Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Peter.
There is also a question attached to it, but you finish what you're saying first.
Okay. So the whole reason the Tiktaalik came to land was in search of a new food source. So when the Earth was very old, all life only existed in the ocean. So you had single-cell organisms, and that eventually became fish over millions of years. But the Tiktaalik moved onto land for a search of new food and to evade predators, because obviously if the other animals couldn't go on land, the Tiktaalik was safe on land. And that's where it all started. They were the first animal ever to have wrists. And Christine looks a lot like a Tiktaalik. They had a flat head, just like an alligator did. They had these spiny, what do you even call these, spiny digits, and scales.
And then even the tail too. Like if we look at the tail, I think you're on it.
Yeah, go ahead and lift that up.
How flat it is. And so this very much evolved from a smaller, flatter fish tail that eventually became the alligator tail, which is really interesting. I always think of like tadpoles. Like anytime I see little tadpoles from frogs,
Yeah.
I just think it's absurd. I was obsessed with tadpoles as a little kid. I'd take a little half-cut milk jug and I'd pick up the tadpoles out of the creek when I was little, and I'd keep them a little bit and watch them grow. But just to see those changes in the form into a frog is just pretty wild too.
Yeah, that's definitely super cool.
Are you singing, or you got that question from the super chat?
Question from the super chat.
Question from the super chat. Thanks, Peter.
This was also Peter's first donation.
Yeah, I noticed.
Thanks,
I don't think I'd seen Peter up here before. So
Peter's been in the chat quite a few times, just not. I believe this is the first super chat. So Peter said, "Do you think it's futile to try and pull the invasive carp in our rivers to try and prevent their spread? So do you think it's a useless effort?" Also, they said alligators are terrifying.
Well, I agree with the second part, but I don't think it's useless. It's definitely going to be a long process to completely get rid of the invasive carp in Missouri, and I believe there are a lot of other rivers in the U.S. that have them, not just Missouri.
it's definitely become a nationwide problem, and I've specifically seen it. My family has property down off the Bryant Creek, which is in southern Missouri. And this year, when we were out kayaking and canoeing, I noticed a lot of carp in the water, like literally schools of carp.
There was a lot.
And, so it's kind of hard because, I really don't know. I mean, as a biology student, you may know what they do a little bit more about conservation efforts in regards to getting rid of, non-native species. But, besides literally, bow fishing them out of the water and stuff, you do have to be aware as a fisherman, as someone who is fishing the waters actively out there. It is good to know native, non-native species, and also, more importantly, protected species.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because there's definitely non-harvest fish species that you could really be affecting the longevity and lifespan of those animals. So to be just knowledgeable, especially if you are active in catching fish.
Especially if you're a saltwater angler, there's a lot more protected endangered species in the saltwater areas than there is in freshwater.
Yeah, because I am that guy when I'm out fishing. If I catch a carp, which I haven't caught a carp in the last couple of years, I'm probably not letting it go back.
Right.
I'm honestly probably slugging them and turning them into fish food for our native species.
And just so you guys know, invasive carp, at the center here, we don't like to waste stuff. We like to reuse and recycle.
Reuse. We're very active.
So a lot of people don't like to eat carp. They call it a trash fish just because it's really bony and hard to use. But they do make good fertilizer. So that's definitely a use for it. If you have an invasive carp, the Missouri Department of Conservation encourages you not to release it to kill it.
Yeah, and they do make good steaks, but they are a bonier fish. So if you just get past the fact that, hey, you may have a little bit of bones in your fillets or in your steaks that you're making, it's actually a decent meat to be eating. And they get big. Carps get huge.
For sure. And the snakehead is another invasive fish, but they're a lot tastier. So definitely don't waste those.
Question.
Can you guess who it's from?
Hear this?
Snake Man.
Oh.
Snake Man. Thanks, Snake Man.
So they want to know your opinion. Who is the true king of the giant snakes? Is it the reticulated python or the green anaconda?
I think it's the reticulated python, just because the reticulated python grows larger typically in the wild.
So I believe that there's either a green anaconda or a snake that we have yet to discover still. So I'm actually on the spectrum as I think there's a snake out there somewhere in them rainforests where humans haven't really been.
If it's in the rainforest, it's probably a subspecies of anaconda.
Yeah, it could be a subspecies of an anaconda. I do believe anacondas are the king of snakes purely because they get gigantic. ginormous. But as far as the longest snake in the world,
It is the retic.
It
But
is the retic.
anacondas are a bit girthier, I think.
yeah, so it is the heaviest. So it is biggest in regards to weight, but it is not biggest in regards to length. And so, respectively, they both. I don't think the retics get as much shine as they should. So I'm actually glad Dan picked the retic there.
I love retics. They're beautiful. They're just a pain to keep as a pet.
The retics, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to be really involved with your retics at a young age. And if you're a new keeper of snakes, a reticulated python is probably not the best choice for you. One, because you've never experienced having a snake of any size previously, and within a couple of years you're going to have a ginormous snake. But they are a little snippy off the bat. And so if you haven't been around snakes and you're a little scared of them, like myself, then you don't end up getting as hands-on with them. So then they become a problematic snake later on because they've never been taught and trained the differences of when it's feeding time, when it's not feeding time, when to react. Because at the end of the day, it is a wild animal.
And that's the case with a lot of wild animals. You need to socialize them when they're young. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot harder to train them once they get older. There's a saying that's pretty common where it's, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, an older animal is going to be a lot harder to tame down. And if you guys remember Tootsie that was on screen earlier, that is why we're trying to spend so much time with her and work with her, just because some of the other lemurs we have are a bit territorial and bitey. So we don't want her to end up like that.
What else did you have in here? Can you whisper in my ear?
So let me put Christine back. I have another reptile with me, one that won't scratch my hand as much. So let me put her back in here. I don't know if we've ever shown one of these guys on the live yet, but this is Leo.
Yeah, this
He
is
our leopard gecko.
Yeah, one of our
Let me go around
leopard
just so you can
geckos.
see 'em
We'll,
better.
we'll get you a close up of our leopard geckos. I love our leopard geckos, and it's another reptile that is a great starter pet for people, especially for kids. Like if you have a kid that is interested in a reptile and you're not a big fan of something or another, you should introduce them to leopard geckos because they're really great. I can swing the mic to you, Dan, if you want to say anything about them.
Yeah, so we have 3 leopard geckos. Leo is, in my opinion, our best looking one. He's the male. He has a lot more spots than the other ones do. But leopard geckos come from the Middle East and they live in the desert. So they're very dry animals. A lot of reptiles do come from either desert or tropical environments. You're not really going to find a reptile in like an Arctic area, obviously, just because they are cold-blooded and they need to bask in the sun. But this guy can drop his tail. They do that sometimes when they're scared. But it is a big investment because that tail stores a lot of fat. So if he drops that, he's going to be pretty low on energy. But they're really cool animals, very popular as pets. And they love to just climb around. And they are semi-arboreal, just like a lot of other lizards are.
Question, Taylor.
It's not a question, it's a criticism.
A criticism?
Uh-oh.
Yes.
That's fine. I'm used to the internet criticizing me.
So Kate said, Cole, I love you, but lots of children couldn't keep the temperature gradient and humidity correct for the leopard geckos.
I don't see that as factual. I really don't.
So there's a product I use. I can't remember the name of it. Otherwise, I would give them a shout out. I think it's by the brand Zilla, but they have this product where you can set heat lamps on a timer, so they automatically come on in the morning and off at night. It's super helpful if you're someone like me who always forgets simple stuff, and it just does that for you. So there are ways to sort of regulate it and make it so it does it on its own. But
Yeah, and our leopard geckos, and the reason why I say this, our leopard geckos, you know, we have our target ambient temperature of 80 degrees in the reptile room. And I can't say we really have anything exaggerated or extra set up for the leopard geckos at all. And they do just fine. But making sure they're getting enough to eat, and then also kind of regulating, if you see their tails getting way too fat, you don't want leopard geckos to get super fat. And a lot of people love those fat tails. And so they just keep feeding their reptiles, but it can lead to fatty liver disease, and then it can fall into illness. But they're very hardy, like very hardy reptiles.
and the sweet spot usually is you want the tail to be slightly fatter than the area of the width between the two legs.
I also love you, Kate, so don't hate me. Yeah, so it's funny to think. I wonder. I don't know if you know anything about leopard geckos and how they evolved, but it's just kind of curious as far as I always get interested. It's like what eons ago did that tail develop like that, and
Right.
and now they're a desert creature too, which I think is really fascinating. I wouldn't survive for 2 days in the desert. You put me in a dry arid desert. I think I'm just going to dry out like a raisin in 2 days. I'm never going to survive.
Something that's pretty interesting about geckos, if I come around to the camera, almost every species of gecko, it could be everyone, but all the ones that I've seen at least have the same eyes. They have eyes like an alligator does. So they've got these sort of bronzish color eyes with a black slit down the middle.
It'll focus better.
It'll
Yeah,
focus.
right there.
But they have eyes that look just like an alligator. And I know the tokay gecko has those, the crested gecko, the gargoyle gecko. Almost every gecko species has eyes just like that. So
Okay, gecko
they've all
is a big species.
evolved pretty similar. Should we move on to our fishing segment?
Kate said she can never hate you, by the way, and she might just know dumb kids.
The fishing, we were going to have a fishing contest live on YouTube and press the ethical levels of what is acceptable on the internet. But I have tried to fish actually a couple times in this tank before we started, and they were not interested. We put in a couple mealworms and a little tiny bit of we've got this little chick feed that kind of looks like fish food. So we put some in that, and they're just not interested.
It's like, to use Michael's analogy, it's like if you got like abducted by aliens and they're just dangling a Twinkie in front of you.
This is very much an abducted by aliens. Missouri Department of Conservation, if you're watching, we're sorry.
But just so you, fish are legal size, and we are releasing them after
literally 20 yards away from where we're standing right now is where their home actually is. So we will be putting them back. So we've tried to be as respectful as possible as we bring it up close to the fishes.
Right, and that's why we got that welder there, just so we can keep them alive.
I know Dan's like, you sure we can't keep this? You sure we can't put this somewhere?
I was telling them before the live, I was saying we need an aquarium somewhere. I'll do all the maintenance for it if I have to. We just need an aquarium.
We had like 6 really old aquariums that were hanging around here for a while. And then finally, Michael graciously said we could get rid of them because he's not a fan of aquarium setups at all for reptiles in the first place.
Maybe I just need to get Michael a beta fish for his birthday gift so he can't get rid of it.
Nothing against Michael. I don't think he's going to take care of a beta fish. I just don't think beta fish are his thing.
Beta fish are the fish that 6-year-olds can take care of.
It may be his favorite fish, but I don't feel like he's a beta fish fan. Taylor, question.
I have a question from myself.
Question from yourself.
Are either of you able to take the crawdad out of the tank?
Yeah, we can show the crawdad off. I mean, he might
I
pinch
just-
a little bit. I'm willing to take a pinch to get him out if I have to.
They're pinches can't
And I'm
happen.
willing
Yeah.
to hold Leo.
Let me roll my sleeve up a little bit just so I don't get too soaked. Might be easier if I take this out first.
Probably.
I find crawdads very fascinating because when they're scared, they will swim backwards.
They do, yeah, and they actually make a lot of fishing lures
We-
that are designed to look like
We
crawdads.
paid very
swimming
close
backwards.
attention to the crawdad and the fish when we first put it in because we were like, we really don't want someone to become supper unadvertently, and they seem to get along pretty good.
Whoa!
That fish almost jumped out. That was a chub?
Crazy.
That was one of the chubs?
I think so,
Yeah,
yeah.
I guess you should put the lid back on.
No, I think it's because his hand was in there. You're going to have a chub jump out.
But here's our crawdad. I'm not sure what.
Boy.
Ah!
Hold on, go.
I just gotta pick him up.
Is he fast on land?
He's doing just fine, but this is our crawdad. I'm probably not going to have him out too long just because he's sort of freaking out, but I'm not sure what species of crawdad this is, or if they all are just one species, but you can see he's got some cool orange color on him.
Pull him back. I'll adjust the camera.
There we
I'm
go.
thankful he's not trying to pinch me.
I'm not. I wish he bit you.
That might might even
That would be good content if you
That
push
could
me.
be a female crawdad even, which could be why she's not pinching you, because she's not as aggressive and territorial as the male.
Do you know if crawdads go through stages like crabs do, where they'll be soft and when
Well, they do molds, I believe, but
So yes, they do get some.
right.
Sorry, the microphone's behind us right now, and I've got a leopard gecko in one hand. We got a crawdad in another one. Oh, the fish jumped again.
Whoa. Yeah, there you go. Oh, I'm watching the crawdads swim down. This is horrible.
Oh, Dan!
I got it.
Okay, we're good.
Things are slippery when wet. Who would have thought?
Things are getting out of control now. Dan went into slight panic mode for a moment.
Yeah, we dropped some mealworms in here to see if they would want to eat them, but they're not too interested.
Yeah, and for you that are tuned in, if you have any thoughts on moving the live from Wednesday to another date, or if you love Wednesdays, jump over to our community page and make sure you're voting on that poll, because I know Michael is using that as our biggest indicator of what's most convenient for our watchers.
Yeah, we love getting feedback, and I know Michael reads every comment, or at least he tries to. Sometimes it's hard because some of the shorts get millions of views, and there's so many comments.
Yeah,
But Michael definitely makes a big effort to try and read every single comment. So if you have any suggestions or anything, definitely leave that.
He's been on set all week with Jenna. If you guys weren't tuned in earlier, they are filming. They were casted in a film called Cursed Waters, which is a pirate-themed film. That's all the details I have for you.
Yeah, that's all I know too.
There's pirates.
I've seen some pictures of Jenna. She's got like a cool hat or something.
Yeah. Jenna's really excited about the opportunity. It's her first LA film adventure since she started to get into acting, because Michael is a good influence in helping people pursue their dreams and aspirations. And so yeah, it'll be really exciting to see that. We'll keep you guys posted. They haven't sent me any behind the scenes pictures yet. So if you are a patron of ours, trust me, I'd be posting them if I'd had them already. So Michael, if you're watching this live currently back, send me a couple photos from behind the scenes, and I'll go ahead and throw those on our Patreon page. But I've had a lot of fun. You want to talk about anything else? If you guys have any more questions for us,
Yeah, if you guys have any questions,
leave in the chat. We're shooting for about an hour. What time are we at now? Like 50 minutes?
We're almost 7. So
Pretty close.
47.50 to be exact.
47.50.
I guess I can shoot you guys a question that was also asked by Snake Man earlier that I didn't.
Yeah, let's hear it.
It was another opinion question. Do you think the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot is the more popular of the two cryptids?
I think Bigfoot is definitely more popular. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Loch Ness Monster is more popular in EU, because I think it's based in Scotland, right? Is where the legend is from.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
so I
in
bet
Loch Ness.
in Scotland. Of course.
Of course.
I just didn't remember where Loch Ness was, but
Yeah, and the reason why the Bigfoot's more prolific is because it's literally sighted everywhere in a couple different variations for sure, and several different names. Taylor's really into cryptids, so she's actually working on a cryptid coloring book currently, and she's going by all 50 states, so cryptid for every 50 states, and
And I won't do Bigfoot.
she's not doing Bigfoot in any of the 50
I think
states.
doesn't Missouri have one called like Mo Monster or something like that?
I
remember.
Yes, it's called Mo.
Yeah,
I
it's
remember
called
hearing
Mo.
something about that on a
It's called
TV show.
Mo technically, but his name is Mo because Missouri Monster Mo.
Yeah.
But yes.
So maybe one evening we could do a cryptids night. That'd be kind of fun.
That'd be pretty fun.
I'm obsessed with the idea of doing a video series where we are on the hunt for an extinct species.
I thought you were about to say where we go look for Bigfoot.
Well, maybe we do that too. Maybe it spirals into that, and we can get into the ghost and creepy niche as well, because that's really huge on YouTube. But what's that the guy's channel called? Watcher. Yeah. If you guys haven't checked out Watcher on YouTube, you are in for the most entertaining episodes of YouTube you've ever seen outside of Wildlife Command Center. Right, guys, right? Any other questions coming in?
Not a question, but hear this put in their 2 cents about Bigfoot versus Nessie. And they said there's more movies about Bigfoot than of Nessie, so of course Bigfoot's more popular. But hear this prefers Nessie because Nessie is a plesiosaur, which is a dinosaur.
I do love the story of the Loch Ness Monster. I think it is a cryptid that you'd easily be able to find and prove its existence, whether it be present day or past, just by, you have a singular location.
Right.
It's like it's been spotted in this lake, and I know the lake is massive, but it does help your search results when you're like, it is amongst this lake here and not just the wilderness. But in my past, I used to travel the country in a bus, and one of the side jobs that I had along the way was a camp host. And we stumbled into this camp hosting job in the middle of Washington during the pandemic, and we ran into the Bigfoot Adventures, which I believe is another YouTube channel out there, Bigfoot Adventures.
I thought that was a TV show. Do they do both?
It started off as a YouTube channel and became
I'm not sure,
cool.
but I got to talking to them in the little town called Natchez, which is outside of Yakima, Washington. And they were setting up game cameras all along, I believe it was the 415, which was the mountain road that we took all the way up to our campground, which was 50 minutes outside of cellular coverage. And it was at this little place called Bumping Lake. It was the only public boat ramp onto this lake in the middle of Washington State in the mountains, and it had some of the grade A Bigfoot sightings in the country. So literally the heat of the camping season, and I find out I am in the midst of Bigfoot country. So that was pretty fun. I can't say I have any Bigfoot experiences, but we did stumble on a mountain lion footprint that was probably that large.
Oh, wow.
So, and then one of our camp hosts that was down the way from us, 6 miles down the road, which is our closest neighbor, he actually sighted a mountain lion right in his backyard across the stream. So that's pretty crazy. Definitely contending with some of the wildest environments you can find out there for sure.
Yeah. So last year I did a road trip with 3 of my friends. We went to Seattle and Washington, where Bigfoot is like super popular in Washington. And we hit some cool stops along the way. Like we saw Mount Rushmore and Yellowstone. But the reason I bring this up is because I didn't realize that in Washington, I don't know if you know this from your experience, if you saw this, but like every single gift shop or store has Bigfoot stuff. Like you could be in like a Foot Locker or something.
Yeah.
Or like what's a popular shoe store, and they'll just have like random Bigfoot stuff on the wall.
PacSun, Finish Line. I used to work at Finish Line.
Anywhere you go, there's this Bigfoot merch.
Taylor, question.
Kate wants to hear the story of how we met and fell in love.
Oh boy, well the story of me and Taylor falling in love, we'll have to hold for another live.
She says she's waiting for it.
I will say that Taylor and my first date was at Wildlife Command Center. So my big pull for getting her to go on a date with me was, hey, how do you feel about a bonfire with a kangaroo? So, drop that hard game, So,
Yeah, so if you guys need any first date ideas, call Wildlife Command Center.
Yeah,
We'll set up a party for you.
Yeah, it's actually a new service we're going to be offering. Part of our events is dates. So if you want a romantic fire in a chicken yard with a kangaroo and a wallaby, that can be lined up. You want to reach out to info@cancatchit.com or events@cancatchit.com, and we'll be able to help you out with that.
Sounds good.
I've had a blast. I think this was good. I would have loved to have like 20 fish. I know you're concerned about the space and stuff in here with them, but
Yeah.
this is a temporary setup. But it's been a fun live, and we'll keep you posted on the community page. If you're not a patron, you're thinking about supporting us, it really means a lot. Every time we have a new patron join, we're pretty close to 10 patrons, which doesn't seem a lot with a channel that has 95,000 subscribers, but we more recently set up the page, and every one of you I greatly appreciate, because you're really helping support what I do for the company in regards to bringing you guys the content, the entertainment, following Bare Hands Baran. And I would love to see that continue ahead. So that additional support on a monthly basis means a lot to me. And Taylor, speaking of Taylor, she worked really hard on our merch store. You can find that below via the link tree, the Patreon page, our merch store, our Wildlife Command Center coffee, which goes to supporting our Raptor Rescue, which is our bird of prey rescue that we run. All of that goes a long way to keeping this operation, these weird things coming to you guys on a weekly basis. And Dan, you did great.
Thanks.
Shout out to Dan again.
To be back on.
Yeah. All right. Well, Taylor, you're in charge of this operation.
1 second.
Okay.
Talk about something interesting.
Okay. Well, so the sun, the longest day of the year is the summer solstice, which is June 21st. And so the evenings have been great and long. And yeah.
Really, I haven't known. I always just thought, I don't know. I just always know that summer is like more. I don't pay attention like which month it is.
Yeah, it's June, and then your winter solstice is in December, which is your shortest day of the year. That's why it gets dark, and there's a time change. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Taylor's going to sign off for us. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it. We'll be back with other stuff ahead. Bye.